everyone, and welcome to our April Family Day program, Music in the Mountains. I am Marie Walker, the Ada Mae Ivester Director of Education here at the Northeast Georgia History Center, and I will be your host for this afternoon.
And I'll be your co-host, I suppose. Hello, everyone. I'm Libba Beecham, the director of the Cottrell Digital Studio here at the Northeast Georgia History Center, joining Marie today. Thanks for being patient. We had some few minor technical difficulties, but we think we got everything sorted out. So thank you for being patient, and we're so glad to have you today. If you're new to the Northeast Georgia History Center, welcome. We've been doing live stream programs and virtual family days this past year, and it's been really great to meet lots of folks from all over the country, all over the world even.
Yeah.
So we're really glad to have you here today.
Yes. This is our final family day of the 2020-2021 school year, and the Northeast Georgia History Center presents to you right now, Music in the Mountains. Today we will be learning about the musical traditions of the Appalachian people in the 19th and 20th centuries. Appalachia is made up of 420 counties across 13 states. It spans over 200,000 square miles from southern New York to northern Mississippi. And Georgia has 37 of those Appalachian counties. A good many of them are here in Northeast Georgia. And the music that was and still is played in this region derives from various European and African influences, including English ballads, Irish and Scottish traditional music, hymns, and African American blues, genres such as bluegrass, country, folk, old-time music, gospel, blues, and string bands all have roots and influence over the sound of the music which was made in the mountains. So from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. today, we will be listening and learning about Appalachian music. You can tune in on our Facebook or YouTube channels. We will have guest musicians today, Patrick Berry and Damaris Drury, and we will also have the very special treat of having a guest historian for today's program, Dr. Morgan Ellis. Today we will also be raffling off a genuine harmonica, which you can see right here. It is of the Swan brand. I will try to get it open so you can see. It's all nice and wrapped up for you if you would like to enter the raffle for this harmonica. I'll leave it right here so you can remember to sign up for that raffle. Tickets for this raffle are $5. The more tickets you buy, the more chances you have to win. So you can go and purchase your raffle tickets now with the link that we will be putting in the chat very shortly.
Yeah, so if you want to go ahead and donate toward our monthly donation goal, the link is below. And every $5 that you donate is going to enter you into this raffle for that swanky new harmonica.
Yeah.
Thank you, TV. Little music from our television there. All right, so folks, go ahead. I'm going to put the link in the chat on both Facebook and YouTube as well for that raffle, yes. So you can both support us and have a chance to win a really cool harmonica.
Yes, it also comes with harmonica instructions that'll teach you how to play the harmonica. It says, "We greatly appreciate your choice of harmonica and we hope you will enjoy it forever. Please read the following instructions before you use it." It goes through and it has charts about how you blow in and blow out when you inhale and exhale and what exactly that means for what notes that you're going to be playing and what key it looks like. So it has the whole chart, which will also be included in your harmonica set, so you can figure out what note you're playing, learn how to play some songs. Maybe if you're inspired by today, learn how to play some of the traditional Appalachian folk music, which does include harmonica. It just says to make sure after you use it to wipe it gently with a dry cloth to keep the inside of it dry before you put it away, and also don't bump it hard. Those are its two attention to details. But other than that, it looks like a super cool instrument. I am not going to try to demonstrate as I do not know how to play harmonica, but those instructions will also be included in your harmonica if you are so fortunate enough to win. So we will announce that a winner later, possibly at the end of this program to make sure, but we want to make sure everyone has enough time to enter. But to start off our program today, we are going to hear from our guest historian and musician, Dr. Morgan Ellis. Dr. Morgan Ellis is an associate professor of music at the University of North Georgia, where she teaches music history, world music, music of Appalachia, and cello. Her work has appeared in a variety of scholarly journals, and she has presented papers and lectures, recitals at national conferences, and now she will add to her list Northeast Georgia History Center Family Day.
Yes.
So we are so excited to have her participate in our Family Day program. Recitals at national conferences, and now
so sorry, y'all.
I'm having
there we
issues.
go.
Okay.
Yeah. Lots of fun issues. Now we're all good now, so bear with us. I am going to see if this will work. We were having a little bit of trouble, but I think we've got it sorted now. So without further ado, let's now learn about Appalachian music history from music historian. This is Dr. Morgan Ellis.
But the angels watching over me when I lay down. The angels watching over me when I lay down the street in my little old cabin in the lane.
Hi, I'm Esther Morgan Ellis, and I'm going to talk to you today about some of the musical traditions in the Appalachians. These are all traditions that flourished throughout the 19th century and into the early 20th. We're going to start with the two main instruments that you find in the mountains, the fiddle and the banjo. Often played together, but they have really distinct and interesting histories. So let's start with the fiddle. People often ask, what's the difference between a fiddle and a violin? The answer is nothing at all. It is exactly the same instrument. So what I have here is a violin, a factory-made instrument. Now, mountaineers didn't always have access to instruments like this, and you often find handmade fiddles, maybe a little rougher in shape, and sometimes built out of surprising materials like cigar boxes or even corn husks. But it's really a pretty simple instrument that you can build if you have a few woodworking skills. So this instrument, of course, comes from Europe. The violins date back a long ways, but this sort of modern violin comes from the 1600s in Italy. So it's brought over into the New World by lots of different European immigrants, especially those from the British Isles and from Germany. And many of those immigrants, especially the Scotch-Irish, find their way into the Appalachian Mountains in the 1700s. And so they bring this instrument, and they also bring a body of tunes that you play on the fiddle. So I want to talk a little bit first about a fiddle tune, what exactly that is. Because on the one hand, it's so simple. Almost all fiddle tunes are in two parts, and the two parts are usually the same length. So here's the one I want to use as our example today. This is a tune that you may very well recognize. It's called Arkansas Traveler. It's actually not one of the oldest tunes. It only dates to about the 1840s, but it is widely played in the Appalachians. So it's in two parts. Here's the first part, played very simply, just the notes. So I would play that twice. And then there's a second part that's higher, which is really typical for fiddle tunes. In fact, most traditional fiddlers call these the coarse strain and the fine strain. The coarse strain is called that because the bottom strings are thicker. The higher strings are thinner. So here's the fine strain of Arkansas Traveler. Twice. So there we have a pretty simple tune. However, the thing that is so delightful about Appalachian fiddling is that you can play it in dozens of different ways. And so I'm going to demonstrate for you a pretty typical style. My version of Arkansas Traveler that I'm going to play here, it's based on the playing of the fiddler Tommy Jarrell from Surry County, North Carolina. That's up right in the top, near the border with Virginia. I don't play it quite like him, but I sure do my best. But I want to tell you a couple things about how Tommy Jarrell came to play the tune the way that he does. And so the first has to do with the reason that you fiddle. Why play the fiddle? And there's two good reasons. The first is for your own entertainment. Lots of fiddlers and banjo players, it's an instrument that they play for themselves, for their family, for their friends in the evening, on the weekend. It's a way to fill leisure time. Not that most mountaineers had a lot of leisure time. But even more important than that, perhaps, it's music for dancing. And that's almost always the case here when we're talking about Appalachian fiddle tunes. It's music for dancing, usually dances that would take place inside people's houses. It was typical to have a dance on a Saturday night. People come in, they clear out all the furniture, maybe put down some oats or cornmeal on the floor for texture, and you have dancing. Now, it doesn't take a lot to provide music for dancing. There's lots of stories of fiddlers who only played one tune. But if you can play one tune fast and loud enough all night, that's good enough for a dance. So this style of playing that I'm going to demonstrate is designed for dancing. What do you need for dancing? You need good rhythm and you need a lot of noise. And so I'm going to make as much noise as I possibly can using this one little instrument. A lot of noise, a lot of rhythm, enough to propel a whole evening of dancing. It was really typical for dances to be accompanied just by one person playing the fiddle. They would stand in the middle of the house, usually in a doorway between two rooms, and just saw away. Another important thing about that style I just demonstrated, though, is the rhythms that come through as a result of the way that I'm moving my bow when I'm changing direction. And those rhythms come straight out of the African American tradition. So the African American influence on fiddling is enormous. It simply cannot be overstated. Most dance music in the South was provided by Black musicians for hundreds of years, starting in the late 1600s. We have a record of Black fiddling that goes back to the 1690s, all the way through the Civil War. So large plantations in the South that had many enslaved laborers, some of them dedicated themselves to music. They would be sent off usually to New Orleans for training in fiddling, and they would play for white dances. And so they would play all of the tunes that white people needed to dance to, but they would bring their own aesthetic preferences and their own styles from their music making. And so that's where we get some of these really exciting rhythms that come through in Appalachian fiddling. They have no precedent in the musical traditions of the British Isles. So perhaps the most iconic Appalachian instrument is the banjo. But what so many people don't know is that this is an African-American instrument. In fact, it's actually an Afro-Caribbean instrument. The first documentation of the banjo was on the island of Jamaica back in the 1680s. What happened was enslaved Africans were brought across the ocean to plantations in the Caribbean islands. And there, they built instruments out of materials that were available at hand. Usually it would be a body made out of a gourd, but today we've switched to a different sort of construction. So these instruments, they were based in part on real instruments brought from West Africa, and in part on memories of those instruments. But right from the start, the banjo had some significant differences. The most important of those was this flat neck, because the West African lutes that the banjo is modeled on always had round, pole-shaped necks. The banjo, right from the start, had a flat fingerboard and a headstock with strings attached. So that's important because, first of all, it shows the influence of the guitar and other European and then also Central American lutes on the construction of the banjo. But it also allows the banjo to play pretty fancy melodic stuff. But the really important thing that comes straight from those West African lutes that are the ancestors of the banjo is this short string here along the top that is played with the thumb. So early banjos, they flourish in the Caribbean islands. Within about 30 or 40 years, we have some documentation of banjos in the United States, first around the Virginia area. However, only enslaved people play the banjo until the 1830s. So for the first couple hundred years of its existence, white people are aware of the banjo, but they don't play it and don't have a lot of interest in it. For that reason, our record is a little bit spotty, but there's some wonderful early engravings of these early banjos and a few remnants of instruments. In the 1830s, a guy named Joe Sweeney picks up the banjo and really sets down the path of popularizing it among white performers and audiences. So Joe Sweeney, he is a blackface minstrel. That is someone who dresses up like an African American, or at least a fictionalized idea about what an African American might look like, including dark makeup applied either with burnt cork or grease paint. But Joe Sweeney was a great banjo player, and he would take to the stage and he would play banjo in the style that had been developed by African Americans. Other minstrels began to pick up the banjo, and over the course of the 19th century, it became a popular and well-known instrument. It also underwent a few more changes. It got an extra melody string, which allows slightly more complicated melodies to be played. And it also eventually got, it got its new body shape, inspired partly by the fact that in the mid-19th century, cheese came in these very convenient round wooden hoops that could be used to build banjos. And eventually it also got frets, like a guitar. So my banjo does not have frets, and so it's more typical of the sort of banjo that someone would be playing in the early or mid-19th century. Lots of Appalachian musicians also preferred banjos that did not have frets. So by the time we get to the late 19th, early 20th century, lots of mountaineers are playing the banjo. There's still controversy about how exactly they got hold of the banjo. It used to be believed that they mostly picked it up from touring blackface minstrels. It's now believed that actually most of them learned directly from African Americans who lived and worked in the mountains, whether enslaved or free. Well, there's lots of stories of individual musicians learning from their Black neighbors. So it seems likely that it's really some combination of the two, although it's clear that there were lots of Black banjo players into the early 20th century. Another outstanding question that people still haven't really answered is, why did African Americans quit playing the banjo? Because it's true that by the time you get to the 1920s, 30s, there aren't a lot of Black banjo players left. How did this instrument go from being entirely an African American instrument to being a white instrument played by jazz musicians and bluegrass musicians and mountaineers? And we still don't really know. There's a few theories. One is that by the early 20th century, the guitar was cheaper. So if you wanted something to accompany your singing, it was easier and cheaper to get a mail order Sears guitar. Another theory is that most African Americans were more inclined to get involved in cutting edge genres, the blues, jazz, later R&B, things that were novel and forward looking. But whatever the case, this extraordinary transformation has taken place. One last really important legacy of that early West African lute, however, from which the banjo derives, is the playing style. So banjo players, there are practically as many ways to play the banjo as there are banjo players. And the techniques can generally be divided into two categories, up picking and down picking. So in up picking, which I do not do, so I can't demonstrate it, you pluck the strings with your fingers, the way you might pick a guitar. In down picking, you use a fingernail to hit the strings in a downward sort of knocking stroke. So in banjo playing, this is known as claw hammer or frailing. It's really unique to the banjo, especially to Appalachian banjo playing, and it comes straight from West Africa. This down-picking style is the same way that you play many of the West African lutes that are the ancestors of the banjo. So I will demonstrate a little bit of that style. It's so simple. All I can do is hit strings with my index fingernail on the beat. I can pluck this short drone string off the beat. And then I can do a few things with my left hand, plucking strings or hitting them really hard to make a sound. But that's pretty much it. That's all of banjo technique. It comes together to let you play tunes. days, if you want to learn to play fiddle and banjo, there's lots of opportunities out there. Lots of people who teach these instruments, summer camps you can go to, classes you can take. But that's not the way that people learned back in the 19th, early 20th centuries. In fact, pretty much no one who plays these instruments was taught how to play them. There are so many stories of little kids teaching themselves, usually on the sly. So the story of well-known banjo player Samantha Bumgarner from around the Asheville region in North Carolina is typical. When she was a little girl, her dad played the fiddle, and she would sit and listen to him, and she loved the music, but her father forbade her to touch his instrument, and he would lock it away whenever he left the house. However, she would sneak it out and figure out how to play all by herself without any advice or oversight. So finally one day her father catches her playing the instrument, but by then she's playing really well. She's figured out a lot on her own, and so he graciously allowed her to keep playing. In fact, he bought her a banjo, and the two of them began performing together in the community. So this is a story that you hear again and again and again. Kids sneaking a parent's instrument to learn how to play this music by themselves without any particular oversight. Then they continue to learn through this process of participation. You get together with other players, you listen to their tunes, and you try to catch on as you go. But there was never any formal education involved. Also, all of the learning was done by ear, which is one of the reasons that there's so much variation in this music. And that also applies so well to the next thing that I want to talk about, which is ballad singing. So one of the iconic musical traditions of the Appalachians is the ballad. Like so many other traditions, though, it didn't just spring up in the mountains. It comes from the British Isles. So a ballad is an unaccompanied song that tells a story. There are many, many, many verses, but they're all sung to the same simple melody. Occasionally you'll find ballad singers performing with the accompaniment of maybe fiddle, maybe banjo, maybe Appalachian dulcimer, but most often ballads are sung without any accompaniment at all. This, of course, is very convenient, a music-making style that just takes your voice. It's accessible to anyone. So most of the ballads that are sung in the Appalachians have their roots in the British Isles, but often have undergone significant changes. And that's certainly true of the one that I want to demonstrate for you today. So I'm going to sing a few verses of one version of the most famous, perhaps, of all Appalachian ballads, Barbara Allen. So this is a ballad that dates back to the late 17th century and was certainly written in Ireland. In fact, it was probably composed by a professional songwriter for an actress to perform in a play. However, it almost immediately entered the oral tradition. People started learning it by ear, singing it for their family and friends, and making changes to it. Every few decades, it was printed, it circulated in the form of a broadside, which is the main form of publication for ballads. In a broadside, you print all of the words on a cheap piece of paper sold in the street. Many of these survive. But then it would go back into the oral tradition and people would pass it along by word of mouth. So when this ballad was collected in the Appalachians by Cecil Sharp in 1916, he found 14 different versions, and they're all quite different melodies and different words, but they all tell roughly the same story. Like so many ballads, this is a story of love gone wrong. In this case, it's about a young man who is dying of love for Barbara Allen, but she rebuffs him. When he actually does die, she feels pretty bad about it and then quickly follows him to the grave. Perhaps they are reconciled in death. It changes from version to version. Many of these ballads were sung by women, and often to their children, and especially their daughters. A lot of ballads have important warnings about love and relationships. Perhaps the most common type of ballad is, in fact, the murder ballad, where a young man entices a young woman to go off with him and she ends up dead. The warning here: get married first. Berber Allen, though, is simply a story of love gone wrong. And I'm going to sing a couple verses. Unlike a traditional ballad singer, I'm going to read this off a piece of paper because my memory is not nearly that good. Oh, down in London where I was raised, down where I got my learning, I fell in love with a pretty little girl. Her name was Barbary Ellen. He courted her for some long years. She said she would not have him. Pretty William went home and took down sick and sent for Barbary Ellen. He wrote her a letter on his deathbed. He wrote it slow and moving. Go take this to my pretty little love and tell her I am dying. They took it to his pretty little love. She read it slow and mourning. Go take this to my pretty little love and tell him I am coming. As she walked on to his bedside, says, "Young man, you're a-dying." He turned his pale face towards the wall and bursted out a-crying. It goes on for quite a few more verses. But that's the idea, verse after verse sung to the same melody without usually a real strong sense of rhythm. Again, ballad singing styles vary from singer to singer, and it's worth exploring all the wonderful recordings that are out there, including recordings made 100 years ago and recordings still being made today. There's some other wonderful unaccompanied singing styles, though, mostly associated with the church and with worship. These styles also don't originate in the Appalachians, but find their way into the mountains and flourish, I think, in large part because they don't require instruments. So I want to briefly talk about two of these just wonderful styles that I can't demonstrate because they require a whole room full of singers. The first of these is lined out hymnody, which is still practiced by old regular Baptists, especially in Kentucky. So this style actually comes right from England. It dates to 1644, when it got the stamp of approval from the Church of England for use in worship. It then found its way to New England and eventually ends up in the mountains, the only place in the United States where it is still practiced today. So lined out hymnody is pretty straightforward. It involves a role for a precentor who is in charge of keeping the singing moving, and then a response that comes from the congregation. So the precentor is going to start by calling out a line from a well-known hymn, something that everyone knows. They might say something like, "Amazing grace, how sweet the sound," and everybody immediately knows to sing, "Amazing grace." Very slowly slowly, usually something like that tempo, maybe even slower. When we get to the next section of text, that presenter will again call out the text. The congregation responds. So a really simple form of singing, but when done correctly by a whole congregation, incredibly powerful and completely unique.
Through this world of woe, traveling through this world of woe. If there's no sickness, toil, nor danger, if there's no
The other form of unaccompanied church singing that you find in the Appalachians is called shape note singing, or after the most famous hymnal, sacred harp singing. Now, this style of singing also started in New England, and it was actually developed specifically to replace lined out hymnody. Back in the mid-18th century, church music reformers in New England, well, they just didn't feel like lined out hymnody had very sophisticated musical qualities. Everyone sang in unison, it was slow, it was to the ears of some reformers a bit drab and boring. What they really wanted was 4-part singing, with the typical parts soprano, alto, treble, and bass singing in harmony. But for that, you need hymnals, and then people need to be able to read notation printed in hymnals. And so that's where we get shape notes from. So hymnals like these, like the sacred harp, they have an unusual kind of notation. It looks a little bit like typical staff notation, but each of the notes is a different shape. And that shape tells you which pitch in the scale you are supposed to be singing. So this system makes it considerably easier to learn to read music. Shape note singing was driven by singing school teachers who would travel around from community to community, especially in rural areas, and set up these 2-week singing schools. So for 2 weeks, every day, community members would come together and learn to read music and sing in 4-part harmony. Most of these singing school teachers were also composers. They wrote hymns, and they were also publishers. They would publish their own hymn books and sell them at these singing schools. So eventually this type of singing goes out of fashion in New England, but travels down south, and by the early 19th century has really taken hold, especially in Georgia, where in 1844, this volume, The Sacred Harp, is published for the very first time. So shape note singing is important in the Appalachians because it's where a lot of people learn to read music at these singing schools. It's often repeated that Appalachian musicians were illiterate, that they could not read and write music. That was true a lot of the time, but many of them could read and write music because of their experiences with shape note singing. Singing schools were also really important social events, especially for people in rural communities. They usually took place during the off-season in the farming calendar when there wasn't a lot else to do. And they constituted the most important chance for young men and women to meet each other and interact without chaperones watching their every move. So this type of singing had a role in churches, but also in regular conventions where people would get together just to sing out of volumes like the Sacred Harp. And there's lots of unique practices associated with shape note singing. Perhaps most distinctive is the hollow square, where people singing the four parts sit facing each other and a leader stands in the middle to direct the singing. At one of these conventions, nobody's in charge, but instead individual singers take turns going into the center of the square to pick and lead a hymn out of this book. The Sacred Harp is the most famous shape note book because it survived the Civil War when most other shape note songbooks went out of print. But people kept singing out of the Sacred Harp. It continued to be revised and reprinted. And today it still continues to be a flourishing tradition, not just in the South or in the Appalachians, but throughout the United States and even the world. So until the early 20th century, nobody outside of the Appalachians really knew what kind of music mountaineers were making, and they really didn't care. For the most part, Appalachians were stereotyped as backwards and illiterate and maybe even violent. Nobody had a lot of interest in their cultural practices. But all that began to change in the early 20th century. It started with a reconceptualization of who these people were living in the Appalachian Mountains. In 1899, William Goodell Frost famously described Appalachians as our contemporary ancestors. And what he meant was that they carried the last vestiges of this ancient British tradition. Now, he was a white man, and he was definitely talking to other white people, especially those of English descent. But a lot of those people became very interested in finding these vestiges of ancient English culture, especially ballad singing. In the early decades of the 20th century, ballad collectors descended on the mountains in droves. In fact, they became very competitive, staking out territory and keeping their informants secret, and publishing the new ballads that they found in folklore journals that were suddenly coming into existence. The most famous of these ballad collectors was Cecil Sharp, who came from England. He was actually invited to the Appalachians by Olive Dame Campbell, who had been traveling around with her husband, completing a survey of social conditions. But she was fascinated by these ballads and thought that Cecil Sharp, who was an expert on this topic, would be interested. So both of them did a lot of collecting and publishing. And as a result, we know a lot about the ballads that were being sung back in the teens. Now, Cecil Sharp didn't care about fiddle and banjo music at all. He almost completely ignored it. But in 1923, something else really important happened. So Ralph Peer, who at the time was a recording executive with OK Records, was invited down to Atlanta by a record store owner. At this time, record store owners made a lot of their money selling phonographs and selling recordings, and they wanted to create recordings that they thought there'd be a market for. And so this guy had a local fiddler, Fiddlin' John Carson, who was really popular with Atlanta audiences. And he was sure that if he could get Fiddlin' John Carson on record, people would buy it. So Ralph Peer comes down and makes some recordings of Fiddlin' John Carson in 1923. Peer thought they were just awful, but he went ahead and printed 1,000 copies, sent them to this record store, and they sold out instantly. And so Ralph Peer realizes that he has a hot commodity on his hands and invents this new category, hillbilly records. He does it basically because he thinks Carson's fiddling is so bad that he's embarrassed to put it in the regular catalog. He wants a special category. But Hillbilly Records becomes a huge success. Suddenly, all of the major record companies are out there trying to record hillbilly musicians. And that is code for white Southern vernacular musicians, most of whom are playing dance music. Lots of fiddle, banjo, string band. We start getting some new instruments here, not just fiddle and banjo, but also guitar and mandolin, ukulele. These are all instruments, though, that don't actually have a very long history in the Appalachians. They had only been picked up in the previous couple decades. Hillbilly Records eventually becomes country music. So this is the ancestor of really all of the country music that we have today. But another really important thing happens in the 1920s as well, and that is the rise of radio. Radio really dates to about 1920. And we start getting country radio programs, or barn dance programs as they're called, also in 1923. The first barn dance program starts in Texas in 1923. 1924, we get the National Barn Dance, broadcast out of Chicago. And in 1925, we get the Grand Ole Opry, still carrying on today in Nashville, Tennessee. So between Hillbilly Records and barn dance radio, we get the first ever professional opportunities for Appalachian string band musicians. Up until the 20s, almost no musician, no matter how talented, no matter how much they love music, would ever consider music as a career, because you're just not going to make a lot of money. There's always more money to be made farming or working on a railroad or mining. So lots of wonderful musicians maybe play for dances every once in a while to supplement their income, but mostly they are laborers for a living. Beginning in the 20s, there's a new opportunity for musicians to go pro. So this leaves us with a wonderful record that we wouldn't otherwise have had of some of these Appalachian musicians who made commercial recordings in the 20s. All right, so thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you really enjoy the other musical programs that are being broadcast as part of this event. You'll have a wonderful opportunity to hear some excellent performers on a lot of different instruments and in lots of different styles, but also get out there and explore all of the great recordings that are freely available on YouTube, Bandcamp, other streaming services. This is a rich musical tradition that's being carried on by so many people today.
I'm getting old and feeble and I cannot work no more. That rusted bladed hoe I've laid to rest. Oh, Master Stan, oh, Miss.
Thank you so much, Dr. Morgan Ellis, for coming and giving that fantastic program and demonstrating your fantastic musical abilities. I'm so impressed. Like, wow, that was a fantastic program. Like,
yes.
Let's give it
like
our internet clap.
Yes.
I'm sure she'll be able to hear us.
Some applause. That was fascinating. So much information that I was not familiar with, and just like she said, such a rich history as
Yes.
well. And I think one of the most interesting parts of that program for me was just considering that radio really did allow country music and bluegrass and all of these folk tunes to really become part of our popular culture.
Yes.
And of course, during the program, we also had some very generous folks out there. I really want to thank our donors, those who donated. So we had Sue. Sue, thank you for your very generous $50 donation. Thank you so much, Sue. And we also had this month so far, Cindy has donated, Jean, Carol, Valerie, thank you so much.
Yes.
And we also had Anonymous donate as well. And I see there's lots of thank yous in the comments for Dr. Morgan Ellis. Absolutely fantastic. But that's not all we have for the rest of our day.
We have so many more. Also, I'm going to take this time to remind you that you can enter our raffle for our genuine harmonica. If you would like to enter that raffle, you can donate just $5 a ticket. The more times you donate, the more multiples of $5, of course. And if you make a large donation, we will divide that by 5. So you don't have to resend it every single time.
Right.
So.
And that's going to be, the winner
Yes.
of that raffle is going to be announced tomorrow. So if you're not already following our Facebook page, you will, of course, if you are the winner, you'll be emailed.
Yes.
And we'll also announce that on our Facebook page as well.
Yes. But next up, we have Damaris Drury. So excited for this one. Damaris is a singer-songwriter with 3 albums soon to be available on her new music website. But until then, you can find her on YouTube and on Facebook as Damaris Drury Sings. We will be linking those in our chat as well. She has 25 years of professional performing experience with a vast resume, including the Rotary International, Asheville, North Carolina, Lyric Opera, Greenville, South Carolina, the Choral Arizona Theater Company, the Tucson Symphony Orchestra, Chorus, Arizona Repertoire Singers, Gaslight Theater, and just so many others. We could go on for a long time just going through her amazing resume. But today, Damaris is playing the fiddle, and she has had since she was 9 years old. She teaches Celtic, bluegrass, country, and Cajun fiddle styles in Athens, Georgia, and she is also a trauma resolution specialist that you can find at www.beyondtalktherapy.com. I'm going to give a little bit of the history behind some of the songs that she will be playing for us today. We will be hearing Growling Old Man and Cackling Old Woman. And this is a traditional fiddle tune heard in many, many fiddling traditions from Ireland to Scotland to Cape Breton and Quebec to Vermont. And it is a popular tune for dances and fiddle contests with a long history dating back to at least the 19th century. It is generally thought of as a French-Canadian tune that migrated up from Appalachia. The first half of this tune, played in the fiddle lower register, sounds the man's part, and the second half in the higher register is the lady's part. Also, very much like Dr. Morgan Ellis was saying, it's the 2 parts in the lower and higher register are very, very common in fiddle tunes. We will also be hearing a medley of Boil the Cabbage Down / Old Joe Clark melody. Both of these songs are traditional American folk songs and fiddle tunes. At its heart of the song, of the one about the boiling the cabbage down, is the chorus, which goes, boil them cabbage down, down, bake that hoe cake brown. The only song that I can sing is boil them cabbage down. So in that melody there, we hear the reference to a hoe cake. And a hoe cake is a thin, flat cake made from cornmeal and was originally baked on, well, a hoe, a garden hoe. So a hoe cake along with cabbage is, well, it's a very humble meal, which speaks to the song's humble origins. Now, according to some, this tune can be traced to the English country dance called Smiling Polly, first printed in 1765, as it has been played and sung throughout the South, and the song also integrates African and European musical elements. This melody is often printed with other traditional American folk songs, such as O Joe Clark, which we will be hearing today. Now, Old Joe Clark, that song's origins are unclear, as is the identity of Old Joe Clark himself. There are various claims that indicate that Joe Clark may have been a moonshiner in the hills of Virginia, a veteran of the War of 1812, a banjo player from Kentucky, among many other wild stories that are, well, just as legendary as Joe Clark himself. But this is a very popular mountain ballad, and it was really, really popular among soldiers from eastern Kentucky during World War I and afterwards, and that continues to be popular to this day. We will also be hearing a medley of Turkey in the Straw and Arkansas Traveler. So Turkey in the Straw is an American folk song that first gained popularity in the early 19th century. Turkey in the Straw was initially a popular tune for fiddle players, possibly as early as 1820. And in the late 1870s until the 1930s, Turkey in the Straw was performed and also continued to gain in popularity in the minstrel show circuit. You may also recognize this tune from scenes in, well, Looney Tunes. The man who scored Looney Tunes, Carl Stalling, used Turkey in the Straw consistently in scenes that took place on farms. The Arkansas Traveler became a catch-all phrase for almost anything or anyone coming from Arkansas. So the sheet music of this tune, Arkansas Traveler, was a tune that was actually originally first published in Cincinnati, Ohio in 1847 as Arkansas Traveler and Renaissance Waltz, and it was arranged by William Cunning. Now, over the years, the Arkansas Traveler has become one of the most recorded tunes in American history, and the 1922 version by native Arkansan Robertson, was among the first 50 recordings named to the National Recording Registry of the Library of Congress, and the tune has appeared in jazz and symphonic arrangements, including a recording by the Boston Pops Orchestra. We will also be hearing the tune Ashkin Farewell, and this tune was made incredibly famous by Ken Burns' documentary about the Civil War. But it is not, as both the tune and the mini-series that made it famous would seem to suggest, written in the 19th century. It was actually written instead at the tail end of the 20th century. In the early 1980s, Jay Unger and his wife and fellow musician Molly Mason were running the Ashkin Camp, a summer art school specializing in fiddle and dancing at, well, the Ashkin Field campus of SUNY New Paltz University. Unger composed the tune, and Mason would later give it its name that we all, well, not all, but perhaps a lot of us who enjoy Ken Burns documentaries know, to commemorate the conclusion of the 1982 camp session. Now, Unger and Mason and their group, the Fiddle Fever, recorded the song, including it as part of their 1983 album, Waltzes on the Wind. And Ken Burns heard the song, reached out to see if he could use it in his upcoming documentary. They consented, and the rest is history. So, I am so excited to hear from Damaris Drury and all of these absolutely wonderful fiddle songs, but she is also going to be singing a song for us as well, and that is the Mountain Song. And the Mountain Song is a strip method coal mining protest song written by Holly Near and inspired by a true Appalachian story. Holly Near is known for her folk and protest music. So, thank you so much for your donation, Pamela Luce. That's a perfect way to start off our program or our segment on Damaris Drury.
Hello, my name's Damaris Drury, and I've been playing fiddle since I was 9, minus a few years. I started playing Irish music in Canada when I was living there, and I met an Irishman by the name of Frank Kiley. And then I got totally into Irish Celtic music. From there, I moved to Tucson, and I've been playing bluegrass, country, Cajun ever since, and I used to have 40 students a week. I have a whole lot of other performing experience, as you can see if you look at the bio. But I do love Appalachian music. It's all written really for dancing, for country dancing and contra dancing. Even in Scotland, Ireland, Great Britain, so on and so forth. All these tunes originated as dance tunes. And there are 3 jigs, reels, and hornpipes. And I'm going to play for you right now a medley of 4 Irish tunes that have been Americanized in Appalachia. And the first one is The Lark in the Morning, second is Drowsy Maggie. There are about 6 larks in the morning, by the way. This is just one. Then Drowsy Maggie, then Pascal's, and then Comb Your Hair and Curl It. Fun name. The first one is a jig, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the emphasis is there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then Drowsy Maggie is more of a reel. So it's da 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 da. Then the last 2 are called slip jigs or hop jigs, and you can kind of hear that. The time signature for those is really odd. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Da 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 da. So I wonder if you can tell the difference when I change tunes. you could have heard the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, So now I will go on to Arkansas Traveler Turkey in the Straw medley. They've been around for several hundred years. Reels, both of them reels. R-E-E-L. Ashokan Farewell was composed by Jay Unger. Interesting story. A lot of people think it was featured, first of all, it was featured in the TV series The Civil War by Ken Burns. And he picked the tune up from Jay Unger and his wife, Molly. And it was not written in the Civil War times. And I'll let you read on the website. It's a really interesting story. And you can watch several YouTube videos of Jay and his wife just playing at home. So, Ashokan Farewell. I'm going to sing a song that is really empowering. It was written by Holly Near years ago. I'm not sure when. I think the information is there. Holly Near was inspired to write this by a story in a newspaper about a woman around 1912 in Kentucky. And coal strip mining is still going on, but it was really going on in those days. Homes were heated with coal. So, and huge machines were invented, earth movers, to just level the landscape to get the coal. So this woman was protesting, standing up against one of these gigantic earth movers. I have lived on this mountain since first I was my mother's daughter, and you can't just take my dreams away. Not with me watching. You may drive a big machine, but I was born a great big woman, and you can't just take my dreams away without me fighting this old mountain raised by many daughters. Some died young and some still living, but if you've come here for to take our mountain, well, we ain't come here to give it. This is a Quebecois tune. For the date is in there somewhere in the notes. In the style of, well, it is a reel, and it's a famous reel. Don Messer. If you love this music, you got to look up Don Messer on YouTube. He is sort of the king of down home, down east music, and it's an extension of Appalachian music. So all goes together about the same time frames. Again, something entirely different and also French-Canadian. Okay, and another common dance tune that you will hear at every contra dance is Boil the Cabbage Down. And I found some interesting stuff. I never really looked this up until last night. Boil the Cabbage Down is said to be originated by African slaves 400 years ago in the South as they boiled down the cabbage and probably the collards. And then, of course, like all tunes, it evolves over time. And here it is, as soon as I remember it. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share some of this music that I used to play all the time and truly love. I just haven't done it for many years. And you can find me on Facebook, Damaris Drury Sings, and I'm creating a new music website. I have 3 albums of original music and covers, and none of it's really Appalachian. But you can find that on Facebook, and it will take you to my website when it's finished. So Damaris Drury Sings on Facebook.
Oh, thank you so much, Damaris Drury, for playing some amazing fiddle tunes for us. Those were so fun. I believe that I have done some contra dancing to many of those tunes, and I recognize them, and it brought back some good memories. Up next, we have Patrick Berry, and he is going to be playing some guitar tunes for us. So Patrick Berry is an up-and-coming musician currently residing in Athens, Georgia, where he attends the University of Georgia. Go Dogs. He taught himself to play guitar, much in the style of many folk musicians of old. You can find Pat's original music on Spotify under Patrick Berry, and you can also follow Patrick on Pat's Porch on Instagram.
Definitely, and I've had the pleasure of seeing Pat perform live at the well-known Hendershots coffee shop in Athens, Georgia. And was so excited that he could join us for this program. Now, the audio quality is very good in this next video, but the video turned out to be a little choppy on Pat's end. So if you want to immerse yourself in the music, if the video bothers you at all, then go ahead and close your eyes and enjoy the beautiful music of Patrick Berry. Now, as Marie said, he's going to be doing some covers of mostly pop culture or popular music that was influenced by folk music. So you'll probably recognize a few of these. And then at the end, he's also going to perform 2 of his original pieces. So very excited about that as well. So without further ado, let's listen to Pat Berry.
Hey everyone, my name is Patrick Berry. I'm going to be playing you guys a few songs. Some kind of folk standards, some songs that I really like, and then a few of my originals at the end, so stay tuned. Alright. There is a house in New Orleans they call the rising sun. It has been the ruin of many a poor boy. And God, I know I'm one. My mother was a tailor. She sewed new blue dream. My father was a gambling man, down in New Orleans. Now the only thing a gambler needs is a suitcase and a trunk. The only time that he's satisfied is when he's all drunk. Got one foot on the platform, the other on the train. I'm going back to New Orleans to wear that ball and chain. Mother, tell your children not to do what I have done. Spend your life in sin and misery in the house of the rising sun. Let's see, I think next I'm going to do originally a Paul Simon song, but this is by way of the late great Justin Townes Earl. This is Graceland. Mississippi Delta, shining like a national guitar. I'm following the river down the highway through the cradle of the Civil War. I'm going to Graceland, Graceland, Memphis, Tennessee. I'm going to Graceland. Poor boys and pilgrims and families, and we are going to Graceland. My traveling companion is 9 years old. He's a child of my first marriage, and I've reason to believe we all will be received in Graceland now. Comes back to tell me she's gone, as if I didn't know that, as if I didn't know my own bed, as if I never noticed the way she brushed her hair from her forehead. You say losing love is just a window in your heart. Everybody sees you blown apart. Everybody sees the wind blow. I'm going to Graceland, Graceland. There's a girl in New York City, calls herself the human trampoline. Sometimes when I'm falling flat, tumbling in turmoil, I say, whoa, so this is what she means we're bouncing to Graceland. And I see losing love, it's just a window in your heart. Everybody sees it blown apart. Everybody hears the wind blow. Ooh, in Graceland, Graceland, Graceland. I'm going to Graceland. Maybe obliged to defend every love, every ending. Maybe there's no obligations now. Maybe I've reason to believe we all will be received in Graceland now. So that was Justin Townes Earl's Graceland. Alright, we're gonna keep moving on here. Let's see. Here's a good one. Alright. Let's play it on this guy. This is This is a song by Townes Van Zandt called Poncho and Lefty. Living on the road, my friend, they're gonna keep you free and clean. Now you wear your skin like iron and your breath's as hard as kerosene. You weren't your mama's only boy, but her favorite one it seemed. You began to cry when you said goodbye, sank into your dream. Pancho was a bandit boy, horse as fast as polished steel, wore his gun outside his pants for all the honest world to feel. Pancho met his match, you know, on the deserts down in Mexico. No one heard his dying word. That's the way it goes. All the federales say could have had him any day. Only let him hang around out of kindness, I suppose. Lefty, he can't sing the blues all night long like he used to. Dust that poncho bit down south ended up in Lefty's mouth. The day they laid poor Pancho low, Lefty split for Ohio, where he got the bread to go. Ain't nobody knows. All the federales say coulda had him any day. Only let him slip away. Out of kindness, I suppose. Poets tell Pancho fell, Lefty's living in a cheap motel. Desert's quiet and Cleveland's cold, so the story ends, we're told. Pancho needs your prayers, it's true. Save a few for Lefty too. He just did what he had to do. Now he's growing old. All the federales say coulda had him any day. Only let him slip away. Out of kindness, I suppose. Few grave federales say coulda had him any day. Only let him go so wrong. Out of kindness, I suppose. Okay. So that was Towns Van Zant's Pancho and Lefty. Alright, thanks for bearing with me. This next song, this is the first of my, I'm going to play two originals. So, and these are both off my new EP called My Lancer that you can find. Just look up Patrick Berry on Spotify or iTunes or wherever you get your music. And it'll be there. So this one's called City Bus Blues. Packed my car and headed out to see you. Put my cigarettes on the dashboard and oil in my ear. But the city bus was full of people I didn't know the names of. So I packed my car and headed off to see you. it the burden of the boy to want his every toy? Is it the burden of the light to frighten, hide, and destroy? Sleep, child, and don't go out in the light. Is it the burden of the mother to watch her child die? I met you in a cafe at night. You were tired and looking for a fight. So we tussled in a motel outside of San Blanc. And I told you I'd like to see you again. So that was City Bus Blues. All right. For the last song, here's A Walk Honestly. Peeking out your head like a rooster from my bed, rising with the sun, saying hello to everyone but me. Can you walk honestly? Can you walk honestly? I've been inclined to face the broadside of a barn just to watch your harm swing softly up to me through the window. I think you will find when you're up next in line, nothing more to be found. Golden fireflies go up the telephone lines, separate me from you. Lord knows what I'll do, but I keep walking. Golden fireflies go up the telephone lines, separate sea from sky, keep me wondering why all I do is talk. Can you walk? Honestly, can you walk? Honestly, can you greet me when I come home? Can you sit all alone? Honestly. That was Walk Honestly. So, thanks so much for having me. Thanks to Libba, and thanks to the Northeast Georgia History Center for letting me play for everyone. Really appreciate it. As you can see, I'm in my home right now, which isn't ideal, but I think we made it work. So, yeah, hopefully live music can start up soon, and I can see people again, play for people. So yeah, until then, you can check out my Spotify, like I said, Patrick Berry, and Spotify and iTunes and everything. I have an Instagram. It's Pat's Porch 14, or it might just be Pat's Porch. So PATSPORCH, and I think an underscore. So yeah. All right. Thanks again. Bye. Golden fireflies go up the telephone lines.
Wow, that was amazing. Thank you so much, Pat, for coming and playing for us, or I guess playing from wherever you are. That was amazing. And what we can see from those songs that Pat played is how Appalachian music has affected music going into the mid to late 20th century, the 1900s, and even into our popular music today with his amazing original songs. So the first song that he played was House of the Rising Sun. And House of the Rising Sun does not have a clear origin, but it was first collected in Appalachia. So this often disputed birth of this song's existence on record, as so many other countless folk songs are, began with Alan Lomax, who found a young girl and recorded a young girl named Georgia Turner singing the song a cappella in the Appalachian hills of rural Kentucky. Georgia was 16 years old when she was recorded singing this song, but she didn't really say where she learned it from. And Lomax included this song on the popular Library of Congress album, Our Singing Country, in 1941. But the notable folk singer, Clarence Ashley, actually did make a earlier recording of the same song in 1933, but his version is definitely in the bluegrass style. So Clarence had said that he learned the song from his grandfather, meaning that the song's origin can definitely be dated to earlier than 1933. How far back, we don't exactly know. But to most people, even mentioning House of the Rising Sun evokes memories of the Animals' 1964 smash hit single, when this song just exploded in popularity. So if you're interested in learning more about the history behind this song, Ted Anthony actually wrote a book called Chasing the Rising Sun, which goes into far more detail about the song's possible origins and relation to Appalachian music. The second song that Pat sang was Graceland by Paul Simon, and it's an example of American folk music that is really inspired by earlier traditional folk music like we heard earlier today. And this is bringing folk sounds to popular culture through, well, pop music. We also heard Poncho and Lefty by Townes Van Zandt, and that song is written by, well, the country music artist Townes Van Zandt, and it's an example of a folk ballad using 4 stanzas with a 2-verse refrain. Another example of how folk music has been influenced and influences continuously even our pop music today. And of course, those amazing original songs, City Bus Blues and Walk Honestly, you can definitely hear that inspired folk sound. But again, it's different. It still has some inspiration and definitely roots that go back deep into the history of Appalachia and country music. But again, it has a modern twist, and those were just absolutely amazing. So make sure you check out Pat Barry on his Instagram, on Spotify, and be sure to show all of our performers today some love. They did an absolutely amazing job showing us the vast variety of music that has been played and continues to be played in the hills of Appalachia. And just amazing. We'll give them a virtual round of applause.
Yes, that was so fantastic. We had, of course, just to go through our cast of characters again, yes. We had Dr. Morgan Ellis with the fantastic history of Appalachian music. And then Damaris Drury with fiddling and vocals, and then of course Pat Barry with guitar and vocals. Mm-hmm. And you could become a musician yourself on the harmonica if you want to. There's still time left to enter our raffle. All you got to do is donate $5, at least $5 for every ticket you'd like entered at the link below, that bit.ly/April21goal. Oh my goodness, speaking of which, Simon,
Yay!
Thank you so much for your donation, your $15 donation, saying thanks for a really interesting talk and folk history, enjoying this from England. Wow.
Fantastic.
So happy to have everyone here. And I believe we have one more incredible music performance by Marie herself.
To take us out, I will be playing the jug. It worked earlier. Of course, now that I'm on camera, it's not going to work. But what? As soon as I make a sound, we'll cut.
Yeah.
Or maybe before that.
There we go. Yay! Her one-note melody.
Yes.
So Marie's going to be working on her jug skills. And again, thank you to everyone for joining us today. Have a wonderful weekend. And I'm going to go get my jaw harp or something. All right. Bye, folks.